It was a calm evening in the small village of Pupgadi, near Meerut, Uttar Pradesh. The golden sun dipped behind the sugarcane fields, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson. But beneath this peaceful view lay a secret, one that would soon shatter the tranquility of an ordinary farmer's life. That farmer was Subhash Chandra Upadhyay, a 54-year-old man known in his village for his discipline and quiet nature. He lived a simple life with his wife Kavita, 2 daughters Dolly and Sonam, and 2 sons Ayush and Vansh. His world revolved around his family and the fields that fed them. Every morning before sunrise, Subhash would take his bicycle, head toward the fields and work tirelessly until dusk. His hands were rough, his back bent with labor, but he took pride in every grain that grew under his care. To outsiders, Subhash's life seemed peaceful. His family was not rich, but they had enough to survive comfortably. His wife often helped him on the farm, and their children were all studying in good schools. But behind these walls of simplicity, small cracks were beginning to form, cracks that no one paid attention to. It all began with his eldest daughter, Dolly. She was a bright student, beautiful and full of dreams. But during her college days, she met a boy from a different caste who drove an auto for a living. Love doesn't ask for permission, and soon Dolly lost herself in this forbidden affection. When she confessed her feelings to her parents, the entire house fell silent. Subhash's face turned pale, then red with anger. He shouted that such a marriage could never happen. "You're my daughter," he said, "but I will never let you bring shame to this family." His wife Kavita tried to calm him down, but his voice only grew louder. For him, caste and respect were everything. But love often challenges pride. One morning, Dolly packed her bag, took her college certificates, and vanished. Later, the family learned she had married the same boy. The news broke Subhash completely. His rage turned to humiliation. "She's dead to me," he told everyone. "She's no longer my daughter." From that day, Dolly's name was erased from the family's conversations. Weeks passed, then months. The wound dulled but never healed. Life in the Upadhyay home became quieter, colder. Kavita rarely smiled, and Sonam, the younger daughter, started to fear her father's temper. She was in her final year of college, studying hard, but the tension at home never let her rest. Then came June 23rd, 2025, the day everything changed forever. It was a humid Monday evening. Around 4:30 p.m., Subhash told his wife that he was going to the field to check the water flow. "I'll be back in 3 or 4 hours," he said, taking his bicycle and pedaling away down the dusty road. Hours passed. The sun disappeared, leaving behind a thick layer of darkness. By 9:30 p.m., Subhash was returning home. His bicycle creaked softly in the silence of the night. Crickets chirped and the distant sound of dogs echoed across the fields. He was only a few minutes away from home when, bang! A gunshot shattered the air. Subhash staggered. For a second he didn't understand what had happened. Then pain ripped through his back. A bullet had struck him near his waist. His bicycle toppled over as he stumbled forward, gasping for breath. Behind him in the dark, he heard the roaring sound of a motorcycle speeding away. He tried to run, as much as his wounded body would allow, but after a few meters, he collapsed by the roadside. His trembling hands pressed against his bleeding wound. The night was too quiet, the fields too empty. He screamed for help, but his voice echoed into nothingness. Minutes later, fate sent help. A few young men from a nearby village were passing by on their bikes. They saw a shadow lying beside the road and stopped. When they recognized Subhash, he could barely speak. "They shot me. 2 men, on a bike," he whispered, his voice fading. The men immediately called for help and phoned Subhash's relatives in Pupgadi. Within minutes, the police were informed and an ambulance was on its way. By the time Subhash reached Meerut's medical college hospital, his condition had worsened. He was bleeding heavily, his pulse weak. The doctors rushed him into surgery, but the damage was too deep. Around 3 a.m. on June 24th, Subhash breathed his last. When the news reached home, Kavita screamed and fell to the floor. Sonam fainted. The two young boys cried uncontrollably. The house that once echoed with arguments now drowned in silence and grief. Their father, their provider, was gone forever. The next morning, villagers gathered outside the Upadhyay home. Shock, sorrow, and suspicion filled the air. Who would kill a humble farmer like Subhash? He had no enemies. He lived a simple life. Why would anyone target him? By noon, his body was brought home for the last rites. His wife sat beside the coffin, her face pale and blank, while his children cried beside her. The villagers whispered, speculating endlessly. Was it a robbery, a land dispute, or something far more personal? That afternoon, his teenage son Ayush walked into the local police station, his hands trembling, and filed a complaint against unknown attackers. The police promised a full investigation. They set up 4 teams, determined to uncover the truth. But as the days passed, something strange began to emerge. The case that seemed like a random attack started showing signs of a hidden conspiracy. The police began noticing inconsistencies in the family's statements, especially in the words of Kavita and Sonam. What were they hiding? Who were they protecting? And could it be that the killer wasn't a stranger from the dark, but someone who once called Subhash Papa? The news of Subhash's murder spread across Meerut like wildfire. Every tea stall, every corner of the village buzzed with the same question: who could do such a thing? The police had no solid clue, no witness, and no CCTV footage. Yet, somewhere deep down, the investigating officers felt that this case wasn't just about bullets and blood. It was about betrayal. Within 24 hours, 4 police teams began their hunt for answers. They started with the basics, checking phone records, examining Subhash's fields, and talking to neighbors. The village of Pupgadi was small, where everyone knew each other, and that's what made it even stranger. No one had seen or heard anything suspicious that night. Investigators visited Subhash's house again and again. Each time they noticed something. The house felt too silent, too controlled. Kavita, his wife, always appeared calm but emotionally distant. She cried when people were around but grew cold and blank when left alone. Sonam, the younger daughter, avoided eye contact and often looked down whenever police questioned her. It wasn't guilt that gave her away. It was fear. Days turned into weeks, yet the mystery deepened. Police scanned through phone call records of Subhash's family, looking for anything unusual. And that's when the first spark appeared. A number that repeatedly showed up in Kavita's call logs. A man named Gulzar. Gulzar was a 42-year-old farmer whose land shared a boundary with Subhash's. At first, their relationship was friendly. They often helped each other with farming tools and water supply. But villagers whispered that they had seen Kavita and Gulzar laughing together in the fields more than once. Too close, too familiar. When police asked Kavita about it, she smiled faintly and said, "He's just a neighbor. People love to gossip." But gossip wasn't the problem. The truth was. The police dug deeper into the records and found that Kavita and Gulzar had been calling each other dozens of times every week, and not just during the day. Late-night calls, frequent WhatsApp chats, even voice notes. But strangely, these calls had suddenly stopped a few weeks before Subhash's death. That was suspicious. Then another detail surfaced. Sonam's phone showed 2 recurring contacts, Gulzar and another young man named Vipin. Vipin was 22, worked at a local dairy shop near Sonam's college, and lived in Meerut's Kankarkara area. At first, investigators assumed Sonam might have been talking to Vipin about something related to college, but as they read through her chats, their doubts turned into shock. The chats weren't about studies. They were filled with emojis, promises, and love confessions. Sonam was in a secret relationship, just like her elder sister Dolly had been. Suddenly, a pattern began to form. Subhash's eldest daughter had eloped for love, his younger daughter was secretly involved with another man, and his wife had a romantic connection with a neighbor. The same story, repeating itself, only darker this time. When police revisited the family, they observed Kavita and Sonam carefully. Their behavior didn't match that of grieving victims. They looked scared but not broken. When asked simple questions like, did Subhash have any enemies? Or, was there any family dispute? Both women hesitated before answering. And yet, their answers never matched. Investigators decided to test a new angle: internal conflict. They began asking villagers about the Upadhyay family's relationships at home. Slowly, truth started leaking out like water from a cracked pot. One farmer said, "Sahab, Subhash and his wife fought often. He shouted at her after that elder daughter ran away. The poor woman couldn't even step outside without his permission." Another added, "He didn't trust her anymore. We've seen him follow her to the fields." The cracks were now wide open. Subhash's strict and controlling nature had created a wall between him and his family, especially his wife and daughters. What once was a home had turned into a silent battlefield. The police now decided to go digital. They analyzed call records from mobile towers near Subhash's field on the night of the murder. And there it was. 2 pings that changed the entire case. Gulzar's phone was active near the same location at the same time Subhash was shot. And alongside his signal, another name appeared. Vipin. Both men, present at the crime scene at the same time. Coincidence? The police didn't think so. But there was one missing piece. Motive. Why would Gulzar and Vipin want to kill Subhash? They had no personal gain, unless someone from inside the house had asked them to. By now, 13 days had passed since Subhash's death. The police had evidence, but no confession, so they decided to press harder. On July 6, 2025, the investigation officer called both Kavita and Sonam for questioning again. The officers knew something. If the Ruth existed anywhere, it was hidden in those 2 hearts. At first, Kavita played innocent. She cried, begged, and said she knew nothing. "My husband is gone," she repeated. "What more do you want from me?" Her words sounded rehearsed. Her eyes never met the officers. But Sonam was different. She was nervous, trembling. Her hands fidgeted, her lips quivered. The officers started gently, then slowly tightened their tone. "Sonam," they said, "we know you were in contact with Vipin. We know about your calls, your messages, and we also know where his phone was that night." The girl's eyes widened, her lips parted, but no words came out. The silence was heavy, almost painful. And then, suddenly, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I didn't want this. I never wanted it to go that far." The officers leaned forward. "Go that far? What do you mean, Sonam?" She sobbed, shaking uncontrollably, and finally said the words that froze everyone in the room. "My father had to die, because he would never let me live." The truth was out. Sonam confessed everything. The affairs, the anger, the humiliation, the constant fights at home. She spoke of how her father never loved his daughters, how he only cared for his sons, and how he blamed the women of the house for ruining his respect. She revealed that her mother, Kavita, was secretly involved with Gulzar, and that she herself was in love with Vipin. When Subhash discovered her messages with Vipin, he had beaten her and warned that he would arrange her marriage elsewhere. That night, Sonam cried in her room for hours, and in her tears, a dark thought began to grow. She wanted freedom, she wanted love, and she believed the only way to have both was to remove the one person standing in her way. But she wasn't alone in her plan. She told police that her mother at first refused to help her, but when Sonam threatened to expose her affair with Gulzar to the entire village, Kavita broke down and agreed. Together, they began to plan something unthinkable, a plan that would turn their home into a crime scene. When Sonam's confession spilled out like poison, the police station fell silent. The officers could hardly believe what they had just heard, a daughter admitting she had plotted her own father's death. But Sonam's tears weren't lies. They were confessions soaked in guilt, pain, and fear. As her words continued, the dark truth unfolded like a slow-burning fire. "It all started," she said, "when my father found out about Vipin. Subhash had become violent after discovering that his younger daughter, like her elder sister, had fallen for a man from another caste, a poor boy working at a dairy shop. He insulted her, yelled at her, and warned that if she ever met Vipin again, he would send her away." But Sonam was already in love. She couldn't imagine a life without Vipin. Every insult from her father only deepened her defiance. At the same time, she discovered something that shattered her respect for both parents: her mother's secret affair with Gulzar, their neighbor. One evening, Sonam caught them together near the fields, laughing and holding hands. Her heart pounded with shock and disgust. That night, she confronted her mother in tears, threatening to expose her to the entire village. But Kavita broke down, begging her daughter not to destroy their lives. And that's when Sonam realized something. Her mother had just as much to lose as she did. In the following weeks, Sonam's love for Vipin and her anger toward her father grew uncontrollably. She couldn't see logic anymore. She only saw the walls around her closing in. Subhash's authority, his temper, his rigid pride, to her, it all felt like a cage, and in her desperation to escape, she whispered an idea that would soon take an unforgivable form. "Mom," she had said, "if he stays alive, we'll never be free." Kavita had refused at first. "He's your father," she cried. "Whatever he is, he gave you life." But Sonam's voice turned cold. "If you don't help me, I'll tell everyone about you and Gulzar." Those words broke whatever was left of Kavita's conscience. From that night onward, mother and daughter became silent conspirators. Kavita reached out to Gulzar for help while Sonam convinced Vipin to join the plan. Vipin hesitated at first, but Sonam's tears, her promises, and her desperation trapped him deeper into her madness. He, in turn, brought in his friend Shivam, nicknamed Ajgar, a reckless young man hungry for money. Together, the four of them began planning Subhash's death like a movie script. They didn't use regular phone calls. Instead, they talked through WhatsApp and Instagram, deleting their chats after each conversation. For months, they tracked Subhash's routine, when he went to the fields, when he came home, when he was alone. Sonam became their informer. She sent messages, voice notes, and live updates every time her father left the house. She knew what time he watered the crops, when he rested, and which route he took home. It was all calculated. By mid-June, everything was ready. All they needed was the right moment. Then came June 23rd, 2025, the day destiny took its final turn. At 4:30 in the evening, Subhash picked up his bicycle and told his wife, "I'll be back after watering the fields." He didn't know his own wife and daughter were quietly waiting for his death. As soon as he left, Sonam picked up her phone and called Vipin. "He's gone," she whispered. "It's time." Vipin met his friend Shivam near the Kankar dairy. Gulzar, from the village side, confirmed that Subhash had reached the field and was working alone. The signal was clear. The trap was set. Hours passed. The sun went down. Around 9:30 p.m. as Subhash returned home on his bicycle, Shivam followed on a bike driven by Vipin. In the silence of the night, a gunshot echoed. One single bullet that hit Subhash near his waist. The plan was to make it look like a random attack, a robbery gone wrong. But Subhash didn't die instantly. He ran for help, bleeding and terrified. The killers panicked and fled. When they called Sonam later, she was trembling but strangely relieved. "It's done," Vipin said. "No one will ever know." That night, while her father fought for his life in the hospital, Sonam wept, but not out of guilt. She believed her freedom was just a few hours away. Her mother held her close, pretending to mourn, but both women already knew the truth behind their tears. For the next 2 weeks, the police investigation moved quickly, yet carefully. Kavita and Sonam played the roles of grieving family members perfectly, crying for the crowd, acting helpless for sympathy. But at night, they secretly texted their lovers, discussing what to do next. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. The forensic teams, surveillance analysis, and mobile tower tracking eventually connected the dots. When investigators compared the digital locations of Sonam, Vipin, Gulzar, and Shivam, the pattern was undeniable. The same places, same hours, same connections. By July 6th, the police had everything they needed. They called Kavita and Sonam in one last time. After hours of questioning, Sonam's guilt collapsed under its own weight. She confessed everything, and the entire web of betrayal came crashing down. The police soon arrested all 5, Kavita, Sonam, Vipin, Gulzar, and Shivam. Each one told a slightly different version of the story, but the truth was clear. It was not greed, not hatred, not robbery. It was love twisted into obsession. When villagers heard that Subhash's own wife and daughter had orchestrated his murder, the entire village went numb. People who once pitied them now looked at them with disgust. How could a mother and daughter destroy the very man who gave them everything? In court, none of them showed remorse. Kavita cried silently, Sonam stared blankly, Vipin tried to defend himself, and Gulzar avoided eye contact. But no one could escape the truth. They were sentenced to prison, where their love stories died behind iron bars. Meanwhile, Subhash's 2 young sons, Ayush and Vanch, were left alone, orphaned not by death alone but by betrayal. The house in Pupgadi stood quiet, the walls echoing with memories of laughter that would never return. The fields that once flourished under Subhash's hands now grew wild weeds. Villagers avoided walking that road at night. They said the air near his farm felt heavy, as if the wind itself still carried his last breath. The story of Subhash Chandra Upadhyay became a reminder that sometimes the deadliest enemies are not strangers from outside, but hearts that once beat inside your own home. Resolution and final thought. This case shook the entire district of Meerut. It exposed how emotional suffocation, pride, and secret desires can turn love into a weapon. If only the family had spoken openly. If only forgiveness had replaced fear, maybe Subhash would still be alive and the family still together. But the story leaves behind a haunting question for all of us to ponder. When love turns into obsession and pride becomes poison, who is truly to blame? The one who pulls the trigger, or the silence that allowed it to happen?